Marvin Harrison Jr. is the headliner, but where will the other Buckeyes get drafted in the 2024 NFL Draft? That starts tonight.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's draft day. We wait for this time of year all year long. It's finally here. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the headliner. There are other Buckeyes that will hear their names called over the next 3 days. Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Thursday edition of Locked On Buckeyes here on Thursday, April 25th in the year 2024. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. During today's draft show, there's only one person I want to talk to on the show on draft day. It's my favorite NFL draft analyst. It is Ryan Roberts. Ryan, that might be the last time I say something nice about you during this show because you're wearing that Notre Dame shirt. But I'm glad you're here. And the Buckeyes, they have a headliner in Marvin Harrison Jr., but they still have some other talent in this draft class as well.
Yeah, no, they do. It's a little bit of an interesting draft cycle, I guess, for the Buckeyes, Jay, because usually we're talking about, maybe 2 to 3 plus guys in the first round conversation. Obviously, there's one elite prospect on the board for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then it's pretty much depth after that, right? Obviously, we're going to talk about the linebackers today, right? But that's depth in this class. Josh Proctor, there's guys that are going to be instrumental to a team long-term, from the depth perspective and maybe becoming starters down the road. But you'd only have one guy that we know for sure is going to be a first-round draft pick, right? And a guy that is not only a first-round draft pick, but an elite level prospect. So very interesting cycle for the Buckeyes, man. I'm excited for next year because I feel like we're going to have a lot more potential first-rounders to talk about, but we get an elite one that could go in the top 4 this year. So no complaints on that end.
No complaints at all. When I look at, I'm writing down positions at Ohio State that are currently in the draft. There's only one position that, I said a couple. There's one position that, there's 2 guys that can get drafted. That's Iberg and Chambers. Both of them they have a good possibility to get drafted. There's 2 wide receivers that are available, and Marvin Harrison Jr. The other one is Xavier Johnson. Really haven't talked about him much, Ryan. I don't think he's going to get drafted this year at all, which we'll touch on him in a second. But it's one of those weird years, Ryan, where you got one receiver who's elite. You got a guy in Mike Hall who can be really, really good, has to show a lot more things. But this year, you're like, you got a guy here, got a guy here. Used to really having Buckeyes having 3 O-linemen in one draft and 2 receivers. But this one's a little bit spread out more than normal via positions that can get drafted over the next 3 days.
Well, I think some context to a little bit maybe of a smaller draft class is a lot of guys went back to school, man.
Yeah.
I mean, JT Toimolau and Jack Sawyer and who else went back to school? Trayvon Henderson, obviously, and Emeka Egbuka had an injury-riddled year, so he went back to school. So, I mean, a lot of the Denzel Burke went back to school. So, Ohio State's loading up, potentially trying to win a national championship in 2024. So, this time next year, we'll be talking about probably 4 to 5 guys that maybe could be in first round contention, which is obviously going to be a very interesting conversation. But I mean, you're right. We have very spread out class. It really is. I mean, you have the wide receivers that you mentioned, one offensive lineman. You have a defensive tackle that I think has about as much upside as almost any interior defensive lineman in the class that we talked about in Michael Hall, right? So still a lot of talent. It's just, I think the COVID year, especially in Ohio State trying to take that shot at the national championship, that has cost a little bit of depth in this 2024 class.
Ryan, we look at Marv, and we talked yesterday on the Wednesday show with Max Chadwick of PFF, and he said there's people saying that J.J. McCarthy might get drafted before Marvin Harrison Jr. Just teams maybe moving up. If that's anything you've heard, I'm not sure. We'll get there in a second, but it sounds kind of foolish to me, just being honest with you. I've never seen McCarthy as a first-round draft pick as a quarterback. I thought middle of the second, end of the second would be like his sweet spot. And that's me even being really kind of nice, because when I look at McCarthy, I'm like, okay, you're a good college quarterback, not a guy that will be a good or a starting quarterback in the National Football League. I never saw that. But have you heard anything about teams moving up to draft McCarthy over Marv?
I have, yes. I think it is kind of a little bit of common knowledge at this point. I mean, Jay, this is what happens this time of year, right? Is that everyone hyper focuses on the media talking heads and the mainstream analysts and what they're saying. Because why are they listening to what they're saying? Because they usually have some type of connections, like the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Dane Bruglers, like those types of people. They have connections in the league, obviously. So when they're hearing something a lot, that means that there's probably fire to that smoke, right? Like there's something to that one. I also have, luckily, some connections in the league that I find out things this time of year. I mean, I was talking to you before we got on about a kid that is probably going to drop in this class that we're not going to talk about during this show.
Right.
But I think that for me, there are three teams that I look at and I say that they could get desperate for a quarterback in this class. That's the Minnesota Vikings, who now have the number 11 and number 23 pick in this class. After trading with the Houston Texans for number 23. You also have number 12, the Denver Broncos. I know, guys, they just traded for Zach Wilson, but I don't think Zach Wilson is going to stop you from going after a quarterback.
Not at all.
And then number 13, Las Vegas Raiders, the other team. So it's literally back-to-back picks, which is fascinating because if I'm a team that wants to trade back, let's say New England Patriots, because that's the team that everyone keeps talking about, and I think there's some smoke there. I do. So New England, if you're going to trade back with one of those teams, you have to say what's more valuable to you, right? And usually, typically, the further a team is back, the more they have to trade to get up, right? So in theory, the Las Vegas Raiders would have to give the most to come up compared to the other two teams in front of them. But what does Minnesota have this year, Jay? They have the second first-round pick. They got number 23 now, right? So they have made themselves all more valuable. All of that is to say this, is that I think Max is actually kind of right on this one potentially. I think that there is a world that a team is going to trade up to number 3, not to take Drake May, because I think Jaden Daniels is going to be number 2 to Washington, but to draft JJ McCarthy. That's actually, I guess, a little bit of a spoiler. If you do read my 7th-round mock draft either tonight or tomorrow morning, it will have a team trading up for JJ McCarthy with the 3rd overall selection. That will be a pick in there. I know. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, but it's the reality we're in right now. I think it's the reality, unfortunately.
You and I are two people that can't stand Michigan at all.
Hate Michigan. Yeah.
Can't stand. I'm cool with some Michigan fans. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're not many, but I'm cool with some of them.
Yes.
They're going to go crazy on Twitter if that actually happens, Ryan. I'm not here for it.
Jay, I mean, yeah, the momentary going crazy, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't turn out good, then it's just going to be a joke in a few years, right? Of like that Michigan can't develop quarterbacks other than one random 6th-round pick this one time. Now, he might have been the best of all time, but like that's not the same thing as drafting a kid number 3 and mortgaging multiple 1st-round picks to go up and get him, right? So I get it, man. I hate Michigan. The team up north, as the folks on this show that watch will probably call them, right? I hate the University of Michigan, and I think that JJ McCarthy is a very overrated prospect.
Yes.
But we do this every single year with quarterbacks in the NFL. The NFL is very poor at evaluating quarterbacks sometimes, man. They are. I mean, look, we had a draft not too long ago where there was a young man from North Carolina named Mitchell Trubisky who went number 2. Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson went 15 or 16, and Patrick Mahomes went number 10, right? I mean, like, that stuff happens all the time. Daniel Jones was the 6th overall pick a couple years ago. I mean, that stuff always happens. Tall white winner, right? Always a tall white winner. Who cares? Okay. Who cares? He's not a great quarterback. And which is why I would not draft JJ McCarthy in the top 3. But if you're asking me to be predictive, do I think it could happen? I think it could happen. Yeah, I do, unfortunately.
Ryan, I'm curious about one thing with Marvin Harrison Jr. and how he stacks up against the other elite draft prospects in this year's draft. I'll ask you that question next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I have been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I'm finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. It's baseball season. Unfortunately, the weather is not cooperating like we want it to, but it's still baseball season. With the weather the way that it is, and you and your friends maybe wanting to make a last-minute decision to go see the Guardians or the Reds, definitely check out Gametime. Keep them in mind because they have last-minute tickets at prices you'll love. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on the YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ryan, I don't think I've asked you a question in regards to comparing Marvin Harrison Jr. with the elite guys in the draft at every position, the Joe Alts, Caleb Williams, those type of guys. I have compared him with Malik Neighbors, and you said you would draft Harrison Jr. over Neighbors and any other receiver that's draft eligible this year.
Yes.
Is he the best player in the draft?
He's a top 3 player in the draft. I have him at number 2 on my board. He's number 2 overall player on my board, over regardless of positional value. And so I think that there's 3 elite prospects in this class, or blue chips, is that we typically call them, right? Blue chips are, in my opinion, this year, Marvin Harrison Jr., Joe Alt, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame, and Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. I think those are the 3 blue chip players. I think that Caleb Williams is close to a blue chip player. He's a blue chip talent. There's no doubt, but there's still some things to figure out there, right? There's still some things to figure out, but I think that those are the 3 blue chip players. I think that he is a top 3 player in this class. I think he's my number 2. He is my number 2 overall player in the 2024 class. Again, regardless of positional value, because full transparency, Brock Bowers is my number 1. Brock Bowers is the top of my board. But Brock Bowers is not going to be a top 5 pick in this class. No. He might go number 10 to the Jets, and if not, he'll be a top 15 pick at worst going to the Indianapolis Colts. But regardless of positional value, I think that kid is elite. I think he's a blue chipper. I think Marvin Harrison's a blue chipper, and I think Joe Alt from Notre Dame is a blue chipper.
Ryan, we believe, and we said it before, I think you predicted Marv to be the 4th player drafted in the draft on a previous show. I don't think it's going to change. I still think number 4 is where he's going to land.
Yep.
Who is getting drafted in rounds 2 and 3, if anybody, from Ohio State?
I think it's Michael Hall Jr. I think that that's the guy, and I think he's the only guy that, unless I'm skipping over someone. No, I'm not. I don't think I'm skipping over anybody. He's the only guy because, Jay, what he has is he is a very volatile player, okay? Volatile in the sense of, if you look at the box score and you look at his stat column, he's not that guy right now. Like, he's not. And if you look at him and you say, he's only a third-year player, he's still super young, there's still maturation that needs to happen physically. Like, he needs to get bigger, stronger, and just be able to work at the point of attack better. But, man, he's a gifted athlete. Yeah. And this is a defensive tackle class that's kind of wide open from the NFL perspective after the top 2 guys. Jerzon Newton from Illinois, obviously, and Byron Murphy from Texas. After that, it really is a pick your flavor type of interior defensive line. Like Rucororo, a guy I like out of Clemson, Tavondre Sweat, some people really like out of Texas. Like, there's other guys, but I think that Michael Hall has a chance to go in the 2nd round. I think I've shared this story on this podcast, but I was talking to an agent after his Senior Bowl week, and that was before he even ran 4.7, whatever he did at the pro day, which was just bonkers. But they texted me and said after his first day of one-on-ones, he's like, that kid's not going to get out of the second round. Like, he's just not going to. But I mean, that's obviously could be slightly hyperbolic, right? It's recency bias to a degree, right? You're running off of emotion. But I think that he goes day 2. I think second to third round, somewhere in that ballpark. I think he's a top 100 player based upon upside because, man, if he hits and he develops and he gains a good amount of core strength and just power profile in general, the kid has starter upside without question.
Ryan, I'm going to go to the offensive side of the ball and kind of get a little specific more than normal with one player. Cade Stover, I think at his peak, at his highest, middle to late of the third round. I think where he will be is the middle of the fourth round. Do you agree?
I do agree. Yeah, I think we talked about it last time, but my stance on Cade hasn't changed, even though he had some great testing at the combine. I think that he brings a great floor. Like, he is one of the best blockers in this class, really strong hands, good through contact. I think he's kind of a straight line athlete, and I just think that he's just a solid athlete. For NFL standards, a solid athlete, which, again, nothing wrong with that, but I just don't think that he has crazy upside as a high volume getter. But I've said it recently and on the show before. I think that fourth round, give or take a round, is the spot for Cade Stover. Like somewhere 3 to 5 in that ballpark. I think it's where he's going to go. Because the great thing and why I lean more towards him being a third to fourth than a fifth is that it's not a great tight end class. Like, it's just not. I mean, we talk about Brock Bowers as a blue chipper. After that, again, it's more like pick your flavor. Like, do you like a Jatavion Sanders, who's not a great blocker out of Texas, but is really dynamic after the catch? Do you want to take a gamble on a guy that's a little bit more of a high ceiling guy, like a Theo Johnson or a Jared Wiley out of TCU? Or do you want to go with a high floor kid like a Cade Stover, like a Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State? Like, those are kind of the higher floor guys in this class. And I think if a team values that high floor, which some will for sure, I think that third to fourth round is probably a sweeter spot for Cade Stover, but it could be fifth, but I would say third to fourth is kind of my prediction.
There's 2 more guys on offense, really 3. We touched on 2 in a longer form conversation here on the show previously with Ryan. Matthew Jones and Mayan Williams. There's 2 guys that could not be drafted.
Yes.
They could be drafted. It's hard on me, man, because I love Mayan Williams' running style so much. We talked about it here numerous times, even before the season. Heading into it, I'm like, oh, if Mayan Williams builds off of his 2022 film, does not get hurt, he could be round 5, round 6.
Yeah, something like that.
He could have been that kind of guy, but he got hurt and really didn't take the steps forward during the 2023 season to improve his draft stock when he was there, and the injuries don't help him either. Will one of these guys, or maybe even both, in Matthew Jones and Mayan Williams, be drafted?
If I'm a betting man, I'm saying no on both, unfortunately. I really like Mayan Williams a lot. He had 6th round grades from some NFL teams before the season, so kind of late day 3 grades, which, again, getting drafted is great. But I just think that the combination of durability, wasn't able to take a jump forward in 2023, excuse me. And then he was very limited during the draft process as well. So I just look at that all together and I just say, I think that he's probably going to be a priority free agent. Matt Jones, a little bit of the same. He was obviously a pillar of the offensive line over the last couple of years. He played a lot of football for Ohio State, but when you watch him play, you just kind of know he's limited, right? Like there's just lack of flexibility, not great foot quickness. He's a tough physical kid, which is why he'll be in a camp and he'll have potential to make a roster in 2024. But if I had to predict if he's drafted or not, I would say he's a priority free agent just because I literally just finished up a mock draft that I'm working on, right, as far as like picking the players. And I just think that there is quality of this interior offensive line class that could cause him to drop down boards a little bit.
There's a couple, well, really 3 more guys, way more than I thought we were going to have. Ryan and I normally don't do this many guys and talk about this many players in one show, which is why we're going to cram a lot. 4 players in the final segment of the show is coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. If you are looking to get ahead and make some bets on Marvin Harrison Jr. on what he'll do in the National Football League, head over to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Currently, right now, it's been the same way for a long time. It might change. The betting odds might change once the draft is completed. Marvin Harrison Jr. has the second best betting odds to win AP NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year at plus 600. Number one is Caleb Williams at plus 350. And to make things a way that we all love, JJ McCarthy's name is not on the list I'm currently looking at of the top 6 guys with the best betting odds to win the award in 2024. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Ryan, I apologize to you because I don't think we took your time wisely to talk about Xavier Johnson, and we didn't utilize the listeners or the viewers' time properly to talk about Xavier Johnson when we hit on the offensive players a few weeks ago.
Yep.
I think he's an undrafted free agent, but my question more to you is, will he make a 53-man roster?
So, quick funny story about this one. I don't know if you know Corey Kinnan, who's over at the Browns Wire. I'm pretty good friends with Corey, and he is a Buckeyes fan as well because he lives in Ohio. He has been badgering us at RPM Data the last year and a half about Xavier Johnson, okay? Because he just is like, dude, this kid isn't getting drafted, but I guarantee he makes a roster. Guarantee it with the special teams background that he has. And that's what he brings. That's what he brings. Like, he was seldom used on offense. Had some moments, though, where you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't really know who you are, but that's interesting. I don't think he's going to ever be a volume getter on the offensive side of football, but he's played a lot of special teams for Ohio State. We were talking about a day 3 potential dart throw. Possible, but I think he's more of a priority free agent. I think he's going to be a guy that comes into a camp. And if he's willing to play special teams, man, and be on all the coverage units and all that type of stuff, he has a chance. Like, he has a chance, right? So would I be shocked if Xavier Johnson is on a roster in 2024? No. Would I necessarily predict it? Also no, but I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Proctor, I think he'll be on a roster in 2024. I think that's an easy thing to say. Another prediction, no, it's the last prediction before we dive into a couple linebackers and kind of cram these two guys together, Ryan. So we're going to see how well you can put Chambers and Eichenberg together in a short period of time. Josh Proctor, to me, I want to make a prediction. I'm going to see what you think.
Yep.
Middle of the 7th round. And I do think that's mainly not because the 2024 film was bad. It's the injury history that I think hurts him right now.
It definitely hurts him. I was going to say 6th to 7th. So, I mean, I accept 7th. I think that makes a lot of sense. He's a player that, again, the flashes that I've seen are really nice, man. I think he's got some good. I think he's played some good football for Ohio State. The problem is he hasn't played enough football for Ohio State, right? And when you're talking about a day 3 player, that's a depth piece. That his best ability is availability, right? And ability to play special teams. I think he'll be a really good special teamer if he's available, but the durability concerns definitely scare you. But the kid's a functionally solid athlete for the NFL level. He's played a lot of football for Ohio State. He was asked to do a lot of different things for Ohio State defensively as well. And he has special teams upside, I believe, as a coverage unit player. So I will say he gets drafted late, 6 to 7, somewhere in that ballpark. And I do believe he probably makes a roster in 2024 because it's not a great safety class either. I mean, like, literally, I talked about it, and we've talked about it in nauseum about like the tight end position and not being a great class and how that helps Cade Stover. I feel the same way about Proctor, man. Like, Proctor could capitalize, at least in the draft, on the fact that it's not a great safety class this year. It's just really not.
Ryan, you got 2 linebackers here. They're both talented guys at the college level. I'm not really sure how either one's game will translate to make them have a long career in the NFL. But then also, to get there, you have to do something, either get drafted or get signed as an undrafted free agent. I think both of them do get signed as undrafted free agents. But before we get to that prediction, when you look at Chambers and Eichenberg as a tandem on the field, what did you see on the film?
I mean, I was kind of frustrated, to be honest, because I wanted to mold them together into one, because what one's missing is what the other one has, but and vice versa. I mean, Tommy Eichenberg is the communicator. He's the guy that's always in the right spot. He's the guy with great eyes, power profile. He's got all that working for him, but he's just a below average athlete. I mean, that just is what it is. Steele Chambers, on the other hand, is a really impressive athlete, former running back. He can move all day, but the diagnostic skills are still a work in progress. The power is still a work in progress. Jay, honestly, like I watch those two players, I'm just like, what would be a top 100 football player if I could take Tommy Eichenberg, I could take Steele Chambers and then mold them into one linebacker. Just give Tommy Steele's athleticism or give Steele Tommy's power profile and his diagnostic skills. That together would be a very high quality NFL linebacker, but unfortunately both of them are just lacking in those departments.
You know how you could do that, Ryan? The new video game coming out this summer. You could just do that right there, find their attributes and mold them together. Like, wait, this is what these two guys would be like if they were one player on the field. Unfortunately, Buckeye fans would never see that happen in their life.
Well, I feel like we need to go to like Dragon Ball Z and do the fusion dance or something like that, right? And get them in there. Like it's unfortunate, man. I mean, maybe Sonny Styles could be that guy. I don't know. We'll see what happens on future Buckeye prospects, but it really is a shame because again, like there's a lot about Tommy Eichenberg that I love, and I do think that he has a lot that can stick on an NFL roster. But it's just going to hurt him long term because I just don't think that functionally he's a great enough athlete to be a full-time starter on the next level. Like I think that's just where it's going to hurt him a little bit.
Ryan, I'm going to start with Eichenberg first.
Sure.
He's my wife's favorite player.
Okay.
She has his jersey in her closet.
Ooh,
so be careful here. Be careful. We'll be busy on day 3 of the draft because my brother-in-law's getting married this weekend. So we will not be watching it, but she will be asking me, did he get drafted? Did he get drafted? Before we even get there, I'm going to let her know what you say, if it's a yes or a no, just so she can know your thoughts here. But Ryan, I feel weird saying this.
Yeah.
Because I like him. I do like him.
I like him too.
If this were the 90s, the 80s, early 2000s, if he's going up against Eddie George or Jamal Lewis or those type of big body backs in the early 2000s, he's probably a day 2 pick. Just being honest with you. I'm thinking 7th round. I'm not even going like potential 6th round guy. I think 7th round is where he will go.
Man, I would say 6th. I would go a little bit higher than you just because I do think that NFL teams are going to value the communicator side of the things, right?
Interesting.
And I think they're going to value the intangible side of the conversation. There might be some things missing there, but Tommy's going to be in the right spot at all times, and Tommy's going to know where other people need to be, and they're going to be able to get them lined up. And I think functionally, athletically, he can do enough in the run game to get by. He's just going to be one of those guys that you're never going to ask Tommy Eichenberg to be on 3rd and long. Like you're just never going to ask him to do those types of things. So I'll say 6th round. 6th round, Tommy Eichenberg gets drafted.
For Steele Chambers, though, it's weird because I saw a little bit from him when he was early in his Buckeye career, when he was a running back. Did some good things. I think he tore his ACL, which I do think, and I wonder, you know more about this than I do with your background and stuff. Before we get to the prediction, do you think that injury that he suffered, his leg injury, kind of took away from his athleticism?
I think it hurt his change of direction a little bit because I remember his first year playing linebacker. I guess that was 3 years ago now, right? I mean, it had to be like 2021, I guess.
2021.
When he transitioned to running back, linebacker throughout, like during that season, I think he made that transition. And look, man, he was a really spry, kind of explosive athlete. I think he's still very athletic, but I don't think that he's quite as cat quick as maybe he was 2 years ago. But I would also say this too, Jay, is that I think that he's a guy that unfortunately doesn't have a great frame. Like he's a little bit sawed off, and he's just kind of continuing to add weight. I'm also kind of curious if, as he's continued to add weight, if that's kind of hurt his athleticism a little bit because maybe his body's just not meant to hold that much weight. But I think overall he's still a good NFL athlete on the linebacker position. But is he quite as plus as I thought he could be in the past? Probably not. So there's probably something there.
Ryan, as a whole,
yep.
I'm going to ask you one. Well, I had kind of asked you earlier. It's just a little fun thing Ryan and I are doing. Normally, Ryan, I would try to have you summarize at the end of the show the current draft class.
Sure.
Don't worry about it. We're going to change things up this year.
Okay.
How many of the Buckeyes that stayed at Ohio State would be 1st-round picks this year?
Whew. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So
Yeah.
I'd say Denzel Burke would be a first rounder. I think, if not, he'd be a very early second rounder because I mentioned it to you before the show, but there's a couple guys in this class that are kind of being pushed into the first round conversation that I just don't think should be a corner, like Ennis Rakestraw for Missouri and Kamari Lassiter at Georgia. Good players, day 2 players, but Denzel Burke's more talented than both those players. So I would say Denzel Burke could have potentially been a first round pick. I think Tyleik Williams could have been at least in the conversation because
Yeah.
there's a hole for DT3 right now, man. Like it really is because everyone just kind of assumes it's, and for good reason, Byron Murphy and then Jerzon Newton. Then after that, it's like Rourke Rororo has their fans from Clemson. Tavondre Sweat has their fans from Texas. Like there's some guys after those dudes. I actually kind of like the interior defensive line class as a whole as far as depth is concerned. But there's not a clear answer at DT3. So could he be a guy that goes late 20s, early 30s and be a first round pick? It's possible, right? Like he definitely could be. The only other guy that I would say had a chance to be a first rounder, because I don't think JT Toyomola would have been. I don't think Jack Sawyer would have been. I think there would have been more second round ish type of players, right? Somewhere day 2, but still obviously quality, maybe like top 50, top 64 players. The other guy, though, that would have been fascinating was Emeka Egbuka. He would have been really fascinating to me because, Jay, that kid is without question a first round talent. Like there's no doubt he's going to test well. He's explosive, dynamite with the ball in his hands, and he's pretty nuanced as a route runner as well. But he had a very injury riddled 2023 season. So the question was, do you still bank on the potential or do you kind of hesitate with the durability this past year and the lack of production because of it? Like that would have been a fascinating conversation. I still would have had him mocked at points this draft cycle as a first rounder. Even at the end of the season, before he announced he was going back, I still had him in a first round mock draft, Emeka
Yeah.
Egbuka, because I think that kid's dynamite, man. I
Yeah.
really do. And I think that he could take a massive rise in the 2025 NFL draft class. So I would have said Emeka would have had a chance. Tyleik would have been in the conversation. And I think Denzel Burke probably would have been if they would have all came out.
There are 2 names some of you are wondering if Ryan was going to say that he did not say, in Travion Henderson and Lathan Ransom. What Ryan and I do in the offseason, probably in a few weeks, we do a look ahead, maybe in the fall, actually. Let's do it in the fall. We look ahead to the upcoming season, the Buckeyes that will be draft eligible, and kind of predict what they might do to raise their draft stock during the upcoming season and get an early look on them in the 2025 draft cycle. You're going to hear from Ryan down the road and to hear why he doesn't, or maybe his mind is changed by Travion Henderson and Lathan Ransom. And could they be first-round picks when he does some more digging and watches the film? Or maybe they won't be predicted to be first-round picks by Ryan in the fall. We'll definitely get more from Ryan on this show down the road. You can follow Ryan on X, and I'm sure he'll be busy on the X on draft night at Rise, the letter in draft. You can follow me on the same platform at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. It's draft day. It's Christmas for some people. Let's enjoy the evening.